Warmuli. Hello, everybody. My name is Tila Watson. I'm Biri Gubbalwiri and Gungaloo, born and raised in Brisbane. Very happy to be here and very honoured to be sharing this conversation with all these incredible women. I've had a laugh before that the most least experienced one is sitting in the middle. Don't look at me. Nah. I want to acknowledge traditional owners of this country, Yagara people, as well as Turrbal people, all the neighbouring tribes. I want to acknowledge the continuing sovereignty of all of our peoples all across the continent. We have not ceded our land, and we will not. So thank you all for joining us. And I'm going to get us started by just getting everyone on this panel to introduce themselves. Would you like to start us off, Annie-Dale?
Lovely.
Thank you.
Okay, my name's Dale Chapman, Yalliay Guamu woman from Doonbandi and Bollin, and I reside on the Sunshine Coast, and I'm the proud owner of my Dilly Bag, Bush Tucker products and learning programs.
Good evening, everybody. Terry Waller, Dulawa and Pantupi woman. I'm the founder and managing director of Sevjan Indigenous Corporation, also on Kabi Country. I've been doing that work since 2012, which is a social enterprise-run community development organisation. We have 3 social enterprises running concurrently at the moment, and always looking to do whatever the community needs.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Madonna. I'm a Guri person of South East Queensland, Northern New South Wales. And within that, I am Yagara, Yukumbe and Githabu. I am one of the founders and managing directors of Nyanda Life Limited, and also a member of, chair and founding member of the Bush Tucker and Botanicals Indigenous Enterprise Cooperative.
Yama. Ooh. I'm louder than I thought. I thought I had a quiet voice. Yama, my name's Dom Chen. I'm a Gamillara woman. My family are tailors and Baileys from Corindai, Walhollow. I teach at Griffith University. I'm a co-founder of fairly new not-for-profit Euroone, which has been established to support urban grassroots Aboriginal food growing, by and for Aboriginal people.
Thank you. So I think one of the questions that I've been wondering and thinking about a lot in the lead up to this was how much the space of Indigenous foods have grown. Knowing that I was going to be on this panel with Annie Dale, I was just remembering, ever since being a very young person, going to events and eating your food and, always being in community and seeing how much that space has grown and changed. And I wanted to ask you some questions about that and get your thoughts on that.
Oh, we've asked that question. Right. So, look, I've been in the industry over 24 years, 35 years plus as a chef. And I started my Dilly Bag just because working for the education department, I really found that we all knew about people who can do art and play a didgeridoo and throw boomerangs, but no one really knew what sustained Aboriginal people for millennia. And I think that was what started me in it. So how do I create a business and a sharing of culture and practice through the business entrepreneurship, really? So I've seen over those years, a huge change. Because when I first started, there were only 5 Aboriginal women who were producing a commercial line, a product. And I think it was in Sydney in 2019 where the over 200 Aboriginal businesses were there for a symposium. So, us 5 women in the beginning went, yoo-hoo, look at us go. We've created this wonderful, creation of native foods. And I've seen a huge difference. And like Cara was here sharing with us and how she works with young people in detention, it's creating that awareness through hospitality and helping our mob to really move forward in this space. Yeah.
Thank you. Any thoughts as well from other panellists? Because I think it's been really interesting. I think the culture, like our people's cultures and the way that they relate to food is not something that is front of mind for a lot of people. So I wanted to see if that's something that you want to talk to, Madonna.
Okay, I'm a little bit nervous, so it'll take me a little while and then you won't be able to shut me up. I grew up eating bush food. My mother was extremely knowledgeable. My grandfather used to hunt possum and bush tucker to help feed his 14 children, while he and his wife lived in fringe camps in the Scenic Rim with his grandfather, who was the last of our full language speaking initiated members of Yagara. So for me, one of the important things that I learned was actually through Dale. And that was the modernisation of the Australian bush food palate into Australian modern cuisine. Because I grew up where my uncles would collect bonya nut, every season bring it down to a nala and they'd roast it. Or they'd do kangaroo tail, or we just eat lily pillies and Mount Tambourine, or oysters. But never once did my mother ever do it in a modern way. Because in our minds, European food was done that way. When we cooked our traditional foods, we did it our way. So when I saw Dale, this would have been like 18 years ago, doing that, and I brought her in one time when I was with the Department of Natural Resources and Mines, and we brought Dale in and we got some food from the Witchetty Grub nursery up there, and Dale presented that food. It was like in my mind it clicked that we can reinterpret this in a modern and contemporary way and share it with everybody else. And that has been like game-changing for me, and seeing the change in not just our community, but this interest that everybody else now has in native foods, and also the risks of this renewed interest, because like in most things, they are not in any way managed around the impacts on community and traditional ecological knowledge.
Thank you. And I might, incredible answer. And on that, I'm really interested because I guess that's where we come to this point of food sovereignty as well, right? Because it's like, how do we maintain our sovereignty in that space? And so I'm going to ask you, Auntie Terry.
You gave me the curly one. Well, I guess I can speak to it in terms of our latest social enterprise, which is the Gallaroo Native Foods Orchard. We call it Gallaroo Forever Fruits and Flowers, up on the Sunshine Coast Noosa hinterland in a little suburb called Koroi. Don't know if you all know that one. And for us, acquiring this land closed our ecosystem. It's a social and environmental love and care ecosystem that we've created. And having the Bush Foods Orchard really brings food sovereignty front and centre now to our minds and everything that we do. We also ran a little native foods infused cafe called Deadly Espresso at Yamundi, which unfortunately after 7 years we had to move from there, but luckily just we're settling on another cafe in it on the Noosa River at Gympie Terrace. So we're very excited about that, to bring that all back on board again. For us, it means cultural preservation. So by cultivating the foods on Gallaroo, I've written this down, it supports the preservation and revitalisation of our Indigenous foods and our Indigenous food practices as well. It gives us local control. I love the fact that when the young people come there, or anybody, it's not just for young people, but when they come there, they feel a sense of, this is ours to share, which is very, very empowering. It brings biodiversity into our culinary worlds. All the things that you've tried from Cara tonight. It's, I don't know if many of you have tried those flavours before, but they really are something to celebrate. And when you taste them like Madonna tastes them, straight off the tree, straight out of the pod, straight off the rocks, They really do have unique flavours, not to mention all the health benefits in, nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals, all the euticals. But the nutrient dense stuff and all the discoveries now, discovering all the compounds that our elders have known for millennia. It's exciting to share that with people. Should I keep going?
What do you reckon?
I got a few points. Yeah. Nutrition and health, like we do some work with Bond University with their dietetics and nutrition people, and we've done some amazing things that UQ have done with us, and we've discovered some, we haven't discovered, it's rediscovering Indigenous food systems really, but we're sharing now some game-changing things. So it's like Madonna said though, comes with the risks, but we will try and manage that, and with the help of everybody, kind of like in events like tonight, getting behind that kind of like food security and food sovereignty. It's really great. We need all of the, being 3% of the population, we need the 97% of the population as good allies. It just aligns so well with the topic of food sovereignty.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to say as well, for anyone on the panel, please nudge me if there's something that if you're hearing someone and you want to jump on the back of something, please nudge me and let me know, because I do want this to feel like a natural conversation. We don't always have yarns where we've got lights in our faces and everyone's sitting down listening to us. Please nudge. I was wondering, with your work, Dom, how do you sort of see the future, and also how have you, benefited from elders like the Aunties here who've done so much work in this area?
Yeah, that's it. Just really paving the way and creating that space for, I'm going to say young, but I've got quite a few grey hairs. But people for myself, to really step into and just, keep that work going and keep honouring the work that's been going for a really long time. Because there's so much to be done and in that space as well. When we've got the energy for it, just to keep that going.
I guess one other thing I would ask as well, and please jump in, what keeps you going when you start to feel that energy dropping? Annydale.
Back to the old chook. Okay, so what keeps me going is the fact that, I go into schools and I teach 3-year-olds about bush food, and I teach 100-year-olds about bush food. So what I really like is, what keeps me going, I guess, is that enthusiasm that comes from each and every one of those kids and elders who are proud to understand that First Nations people are the traditional owners of this country, and for them to be able to use native products and just have it growing in their yard. I was down at Emerald the other day, and I raided my lemon myrtle tree and threw it in the bag and took it on the plane. And I got there and I started handing around these lemon myrtle leaves for everyone to sniff and scratch and whatever. And it didn't matter what else I did. I could have done a tap dance, and all sorts of things. But those kids honestly just wanted to know about that lemon myrtle plant. What can I do with it? I can put it in a cup of tea. What else can I do with it? Oh my goodness, this is fantastic. So I think that for me, it's about those young souls that are really learning from what our ancestors have given us, and it's passing that on to the future. So that's where I love that feeling, and I think all of us here do. So, that's it for me. Jerry?
What keeps me going? I don't really know, really. Yeah, I'll pass.
Yeah, I think for me is just love of culture, love of country, understanding the importance of our foods for our communities. Not just for our health, but for continuing culture, for growing our governance, capacity building, and continuing our knowledges. But making sure, we're caring for country as well in ways that we can. And I think connecting with our foods is really, really important. Some of our most immediate connection that we can have with country, smelling, tasting, touching, having, I eat some of my foods from country and it just feels so good, feels very different to eating a steak from Coles. That's what keeps me going. Love of culture, love of my community.
What keeps me going? Knowing that there are more of us in the space than there ever has been before gives me hope, and knowing that we're enabling the future generations to drive this industry. But for me personally, one of the things that I keep in my mind is that, particularly in areas on the east coast of Australia where we have been completely subject to the devastation of colonialism and have missed out on numerous opportunities for compensation or remuneration. From the loss of land to resources and vegetation removal at an extremely high rate. What we've got left is our knowledge. And so for me, being able to create and help enable the creation of ethical research, ethical benefit sharing models that recognise Indigenous knowledge has informed the native foods industry in Australia and will continue to do so, and that there must be ways in which community can benefit from the applications of that research across multiple industries and not just be sidelined to just being food producers. I'll pay that community at Wild Harvest Kakadu plum, but I won't enable them any of the benefits of the application of that research to preservation in the seafood industry. So that's what keeps me going, is that we still don't have all of what we need in place so that those Indigenous academic researchers coming through, the communities, the businesses, can have what they need to benefit from what we've got left.
I had a realisation, but it's pretty much, it's what everyone else has said here, but looking forward, and like Madonna said, knowing that we don't quite have in place everything that needs to be in place. So yeah, that's what came back to me, that's what keeps me going, looking forward, our future generations, and trying to put in place the best thing that we can while we're living and breathing.
Thank you. Oh, I'm in awe over here. Something you touched on there, Madonna. How do we create a culture within the industry and within the wider industry, not just within the Indigenous food industry? How do we create and empower a culture that is ethical towards blackfellas? And what are the mechanisms of making sure that people aren't just going to take our knowledge and exploit, our communities?
That's a really big question, and I don't have the answers, and I'm glad, because there's lots of very smart, capable people in the space from our communities and in the businesses that collectively have the answer. But from what I've seen, one of the spaces that have gone unchecked for a long time is research. And the reality is, research, and particularly in food science, informs the demand around why you want what you buy. And in fact, it informs pretty much all of your food system, from the nutritional value and the labels that go on your packaging to why it's created a demand in the first place. So if we don't get into that space and start demonstrating what good behaviour is in research, then it won't matter how many businesses we have. The communities and the growers and the people that are right at the forefront of the knowledge that's being exploited will not gain from that. And they will continue to be land rich but capital poor in terms of financial and economic benefits. So the best thing, I think, in my mind, is we support our businesses. We support Indigenous businesses because it creates and generates wealth and economic opportunity. That is true self-determination. We support any of the structures that they're putting together to enable a greater and stronger voice, like FINBA. The First Nations Bush, forgive me, I'm going to butcher this style, hey. First Nations Bush Food and Botanicals Alliance, Australia. BBIC, which is the Bush Tucker Botanicals Indigenous Enterprise Cooperative, which is not FINBA. It is Indigenous business communities and businesses that grow native foods. And so we respect the role that FINBA plays. Get behind those types of things because they are trying to shift the narrative here, ensure that there is a First Nations voice that even informs FSANs in terms of food standards. A lot of people don't realise we've got over 3,000 Indigenous native foods recorded across Australia, and maybe 12 of those have met food standards according to FSANs. Yeah. But to expedite or get past that process, they have to use Indigenous traditional knowledge. And now what's being sought is the application of that in the medicinal space. And if they can get hold of traditional knowledge in that space, well, the economic benefits, the profit from that is exponential. So we have to work together. We have to work collaboratively. I think we need to demonstrate what good business is and what benefit sharing looks like, and then have the expectation that anyone who wants to do good business, from university research institutes to investment corporations internationally and nationally, this is what you've got to do. If you want to not only meet social licence, but you want to demonstrate ethical behaviour in research and its applications.
Thank you. Annie Dale, how can whitefellas be good allies to us, or try to be good allies to us?
Madonna said something about supporting Indigenous business, and people often ask me that question at my shop. They go, how do I know who's an Indigenous business? And I said, simply ask. Don't be frightened to ask a business on Facebook or whatever social media platform you're on to actually say where you're mob from. Because the moment you say that, you'll either get sent back, I'm Yali, I'm this, I'm that, and la, 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 or you get, here's the website. So as soon as you get the website, you know that it's not mob, okay? Because we are proud people. We love to say who we are and what we're doing. So, you know, I think that, to me, that's one of the key things that I always find. What was the question again?
How can whitefellas in the food space be good allies?
Yeah. So supporting Indigenous business. When you're a farmer, so I work with Indigenous and non-Indigenous growers, because so when I first started doing bush food, there was no one around who was doing it. There was very limited, mainly non-Indigenous people. So I had built beautiful relationships with those people over the years, and that's the other thing, is we want to build relationships with those growers, those farmers, you know, and we want to be able to share our knowledge with you. And together we can grow a far better Australia, in my opinion, and we'll become a healthier nation through that process. I don't know, try to, like when you're in a community and you go, oh gee, I've got to go out and find out who the local owners are, traditional owners are, go and do that. Make yourself known to people. We're not going to spear you, you know. We're going to welcome you because we want you to embrace our culture. We want you to be part of our journey that, you know, our ancestors started hundreds of thousands of years ago. So I think that's one of the main things, is breaking down some barriers, and we can only do that together. You know, we have to work together to make all of these things beneficial for everyone. So the Madonna's talked about there's the Nagoya Protocol that started many, many moons ago over in Nagoya in Japan. So if you look it up, Nagoya Protocols, you'll find that equal benefit sharing has to come back. So, you know, we talk with like mining companies, right? And mining companies are out there raping and pillaging our land, right? And yes, we need the coal, we need all that to make the world go round. But the thing is that we need to create an equality for everyone, and through the Nagoya Protocols, which means that people who work with Indigenous communities and Indigenous peoples, there's a mutual understanding and respect and a benefit back to communities. It's not always monetary, okay? So it's not always that. Some of our communities have said, look, we would really love to put 7 of our people through university. Can you sponsor them? Can you be that? Some people go, okay, I want a kindergarten. We want a kindergarten in our community. Will you help us build that community? That kindy. So there's lots and lots of different ways for mutual benefit sharing throughout this industry. Yeah.
Thank you.
Quite often when we go to a space and the conversation starts, because it is a minority, it often gets consumed by the majority voice, which is natural. It's a natural thing that happens, but just be a little bit more conscious and conscientious of that. I think a great listening ally is pretty powerful. Yep.
Dom, how do you think that white fellas can be good allies?
Listening. Yeah, when I was thinking before, Annie, Terry, listening, and just brought to mind a beautiful word we have in Gamilaroi, Winanay, Winanali, means to listen, but it doesn't just mean to kind of listen with our ears. It means it's whole body listening, like listen with because it also means to respect, to understand, to know, and to love as well. And it's a bit more of a rounded, active listening in that space. And I think also, when I think about the logics of colonisation as well, it's very much about taking space, whether that's taking physical space, taking land, resources, also about ideological space, like whose story, whose narrative gets that voice in that space. Temporal space as well, are we pushing Aboriginal things back into the past because they only happen in the past, and they're here in the present and in the future as well. So I think, it's a big question, and I could probably talk for hours about it, but I think simply just, find ways, and there's many different ways to make space, move out of the way sometimes. Don't try and, fix everything, do everything. We're more than capable, and just leaving some space, holding some space, and good listening would be some broad ways to approach that.
I'm hearing land back. Yes, clap again for Dom, please. Thank you. And I wanted to push in a little bit because I'm thinking there's a lot of themes coming up, like the theme of relationality, and that connection of, like we have to grow these connections organically. And I wonder, how do you think, Annie Terry, people can grow more meaningful connections using and in connection with Indigenous foods?
We didn't get these questions.
I know, sorry.
Ahead of time.
I'm just thinking about it. No. What do you think, if you, as an example, if you had to tell someone how they can connect with local Indigenous foods, what would you tell them to do?
Take time. Take time is what's kind of coming to my mind. It's not just a consumption thing, like Dom said. It's getting intimately connected to country. That's what I think. And what was your question again?
Let's go to a new question. Yeah. I should have had some. No, well, I wanted to also ask you about how our food businesses can give back to our communities. Going from that thing of talking about the wider industry, like, what are some of the transformations, I guess, that you've seen within your community with local mob being empowered through food?
This is a new space to me, so I'm going to hand to Annie Dale, actually. We've only had Gallaroo for 3 years, and prior to that, it was all, it was all people business. So having Gallaroo, just acquiring it 3 years ago, I just don't feel like I have that experience to answer that with any great wisdom. So, I'll hand it. I'll hand it to the Queen.
Oh gosh. Okay, what was the question again?
What are some of the ways that you've seen our food businesses giving back to our own mob and building up our own communities?
So I've seen an increase in Aboriginal participation in this industry over the last 24 years. When I first started, we didn't really have a lot of our mob doing it. They'd go out hunting and foraging and getting their bits and bob and bring back to community and have a feed, but it wasn't necessarily something that they were going to commercialise in the end. And what we've seen now is, people like Ben Tyler up in Darwin, and Ben's making the most gorgeous Kwandong drink up there, native peach drink, and mob working with other mob to bring in bush tomatoes, out of the hills in Alice Springs, and those women now are creating their own economy, and that I think is what has changed over the years, is that, well, as I always put it, it's our birthright. And we have the right to stand tall and do it. And I think that's what we try to instill in our young people and our older people too, and to keep learning from them, constantly learning all the time. So I'm sure when all these women go on country somewhere, they're going to sit down in the dirt or sit underneath a tree or by the river, and mob are just going to come to them and start sharing, because that's what happens. And we need to start doing that and allowing our old people to give that information, but also not to steal it. IP is very important to Aboriginal practice and culture, and the knowledge of what our old people know, we need to protect it. So we've got some patents out there in America that are going to help create a better safety net for Indigenous people over the next, by 2032 and beyond, because our theory is that the consumer wants to see where that particular ingredient comes from. So when they actually get it, they want to be able to go, okay, I'm going to, do a camera shot on that QR code, and it's going to beam up into the cosmos, and it's going to tell me that I just bought that bush tomato relish from my dilly bag, but dilly bag got it from an Aboriginal community, from Pitjara women who went out and sourced that ingredient, And that's what I think our consumer wants to know. But along that trail, it's also the protection of the cultural knowledge, the practices and all that sort of thing needs to be covered. And remuneration and that benefit sharing that I talked about before, giving back to that grower, to that community that has, looked after that particular plant or fruit or whatever it might be for hundreds of thousands of years. That bush tomato, when you pick that bush tomato in territory, you can't just go and eat it, okay? Because if you start eating, it's got a wax on it. That wax is going to give you a bellyache, right? So you can't do that. And our women sing that fruit. So they sing into the ground. They rub that tomato into the dirt and get rid of the wax that's around it. Then it's all washed and la la la, I'm back to you. But it's part of the songlines, isn't it? So it's part of songlines, and we need to continue those practices. Because I said to the lady, we could just do this. And they went, no, growl at me. Because there's a cultural connection. So as they're sitting in the dirt and they're doing this business and they're singing it, there's a connection from the ground through to that plant or fruit, through their bodies, through their ancestors and back down through spirit. Yeah? So it's really important that, some people may think that's silly, but we need to really embrace those practices and share with you as a consumer or a producer. This is what happens. Yeah, that's it.
If it's okay, if I can just go back a step to the topic that Dale mentioned. We are different societies, different nations with different languages, different practices, and a lot of our plant knowledge, our practices in terms of how we apply plants will be dictated by the ecosystems in which are in our individual homelands. And so as a result, there will be different things that different communities and different societies will want to gain from this experience around the native foods the growing industry in native bush foods. One of the things I just wanted to be able to remind people of is, with Auntie Dale, what you mentioned is extremely critical around the value systems for culturally with plants and animals, and how intricately connected language is with that, and how it formed part of our trade systems, because knowledge is what was traded, as well as the tools, the technology associated to processing something. And the reason I want to labour on that a little bit is because if we don't do this properly, society in Australia runs the risk of eroding one of the longest continuing cultures in the world. So what Auntie just mentioned about that desert raisin or tomato is an old continuing culture. So if it's not appreciated, then it over time just gets put to the periphery, becomes fringe dwellers in another industry until one day it's not heard at all. And it's so important because it is the story of this continent, and the story of this continent explains its environmental and cultural evolution, because everything we've ever done is in response to country. That's why the value system's not around creating pyramids, it's around people and practice and the system that goes with that. So we run a risk in Australia where in the next 15 to 20 years, we are seeing a shift around kakadu plum. It's one of the few native foods in the whole continent where our First Nations communities are the largest producers, suppliers of kakadu plum in the country. But other people have a lot of cash asset and they can buy lots of land, and because we have no federal legislation protecting Indigenous IP around this, particularly biocultural, they can get lots and lots of seeds and they can grow and outgrow the orchards that exist in those communities. But what those people don't realise is those communities got skin law to those plants. And by doing that very action, they don't realise they are eroding at and being part of undermining that oldest continuing living culture, which I think we all as Australians have a duty of care to try and preserve for as long as we possibly can. So that for me is one of the human aspects of the native foods industry, that while we're looking at getting these ingredients onto our plates and commercialise it and make it available to everybody, this is the area that is going to get impacted quite significantly by that push if we don't manage it and place expectations on the government to do what they are responsible for, which is apply the protocol around the preservation of Indigenous knowledge and try and create a moratorium of protection for a period of time until those communities can expand and scale and continue to be part of that as it becomes more competitive.
Sitting here listening, I'm in the box seat. Yeah. I mean, I don't have anything more to add. I think just to reiterate, and I hope, I'm sure you're all hearing just the what we probably see, in terms of the economic side is just the tip of the iceberg, and all of the work that happens, maybe that's not as visible, which is so important to hold and keep. And and I mean, I can speak maybe briefly. So I'm involved in a sort of working group, a Gamilla Grains working group, and it's only just very young, just the last sort of 6 months or whatever. We're all trying to come together and be as true to sort of cultural protocol and cultural processes as we can, and in order to build governance around and rebuild knowledges, relationships. The grains are obviously very important, but the grains are just a conduit through which we're doing all this really important work as well. And really powerful stuff. When I just sort of sit around and hear people speak, it's really quite overwhelming, and the power of that stuff. When we come together around our foods and rebuild our good connections and our governance and ways of proper ways of doing things. It's really powerful. Just wanted to add that little bit.
It's such a holistic thing. Like when we talk about food, we're not just talking about food, we're talking about culture, we're talking about connection, we're talking about country, we're talking about the future, the past, we're talking about now, And I think that's unique to us, I haven't really seen that within the wider space, whether it's the agricultural kind of part of the food growing, and you don't really see that connection, you don't see that holistic spirit, I guess, that I feel like comes from all of you when we're talking about this, which is just really beautiful. I'm definitely going to be walking away much richer for this. And Auntie Terry, I promise this question's better. I'm so sorry. I promise, Auntie, I promise. What do you think the next generations look like? What's the future look like? And how's it richer? That's a good question. Isn't that a good question?
It's a great one, but it's such a big one.
Well, it doesn't have to make it local. Make it local.
I guess I'll take Dom's little example there and just talk about a couple of projects that we do. One's called the Modern Songlines Project, and its little tagline is protecting our source of human permaculture. And we make sure in that project that we do all of that. We do the songs, we paint, we dance the botanics, and we make sure that the young people who are coming forward who have that relationship with that particular plant become the kolongolu, the guardians of that thing, and they're given the space to make sure that they can connect to that and aren't just told to finish that page on page 3 of the Cert 1 in hospitality. So a lot of time is taken to make sure that is continued as well. And the other one we're doing is a youth connect, and that's trying to get the cross-cultural thing where Indigenous youth and non-Indigenous youth are coming together and deeply getting to build this relational thing through a project. We're encouraging them to theme their project to an industry, agriculture, hospitality, tourism, creating these projects which we're trying to get support for, but if we don't, we'll do it ourselves, being the social enterprise model. The future looks like youth being supported so that these things are passed down. That's a little, just a little case kind of study of what we're doing and keeping it local. Yeah.
We're so privileged to have you with us tonight. What do you think the future's going to look like?
I think the future is fantastic for all of us, all Australians, but not just First Nations, but all of us. And I feel that, what's the word? The bush food industry or the native food industry is not just food, yeah? So we've talked about it's nutraceutical, pharmaceutical, it's beverage. There's a whole range of different industries out there where our people, our knowledge can be implemented into. So, you know, there's the spinifex grass up North Queensland that's used in the aviation industry. It's used for condoms, you know, because it's one of the strongest latex things you can get. So, you know, I know there's a few farmers out there, okay? So, you know, feel free to come and talk to us about how First Nations Australians can work together with farmers to build a really good supply chain. Because if we're going to move towards 2032 and beyond, we are going to have to work together. And some of those things like the native grain industry, when you look out on my country, out of Bolan and Durrumbandi and out there, those farmers, we need to talk to them about you've got acres and hectares of land. Why can't you harvest the native grain in that space while you've got your cattle over there? And then the next year we'll move them over there and then we'll grow this up. You know, there's ways that our old people have taught us over the years that we can help farmers to build that industry, I believe. And it just starts with saying hello. You know, it just starts with us communicating and having a yarn, a cup of tea, lemon myrtle tea and a bicky. Hey, make some damper, do some scones, fried scones, you know, that sort of thing. Because when we get around the table, you all know it too, when you're around the table and you're eating with your family, that's when the conversations start. That's when all of that information starts to come to the fore. Like I can be walking through the paddock and I'll go, oh, what's that smell? And then I'll just be transported back to when I was 5 and remember when I was a kid, oh, I remember eating that and la, la, la. And that's what it's all about. It's about us joining together and experiencing the wonderful opportunities and I guess the landscapes that Australia has to offer. Yeah.
I like speaking after Dal because I get you prompt some things for me. Like it's like, oh, I can compliment what she's saying. Sorry, I've now like raced ahead with my mouth that my brain's got to catch up.
Hello, have we met?
We could be related. With respects to I want to talk about food security. Sorry, I'm taking control now.
No, let's do it.
In terms of food connection, food security in Australia, we know that, and there's so many indicators now across a number of different science disciplines with respects to being some critical changes around 2050. We're looking at 9 billion people, we're looking at a loss of arable lands in terms of farming, we're looking at the death of some of the monoculture cropping that's been going on in Australia. We're looking at changes in demands in trade in terms of other countries being willing to take Australian wheat or canola. And 80% of Australian wheat grown is exported. So what we are looking at worldwide is this massive shift, and what we are yet to truly understand is the value of Australian grains and other native plants, legumes like wattle seed, that are perfectly adapted to Australian climate. And so we have an opportunity as a nation to work so well with our communities, Indigenous communities or First Nations communities, to prepare our nation and to prepare the potential supply of a solution around food security in the future. Most Australians don't know that we have some of the largest numbers of wattle plants in the world, and the largest percentage of edible wattle. And Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Aboriginal communities have been eating wattle seed for weaning babies from breast milk, to elderly going through changes in the stomach biome and preparing them for later life where they can't eat meat. And that it's also a nitrogen fixer. It's excellent and we have wattle for low GI. It's adapted to every single ecosystem on this continent. It's quite extraordinary, and so we are still very behind, or still haven't pulled out the maximum potential of Australian native grains and seeds and legumes. and its benefits. So university in US, Tucson, came over to Australia to have a look at what we've got. We've had wattle seeds go to areas, some countries in Africa, for them to grow and eat. So I think this sort of information needs to be made more known to everybody else so that we can support it and support our farmers with transitioning over time, and also looking at the underutilisation of Indigenous communities who are land rich but cash poor, because they also are going to become critical in that food system as helping provide the food that we are all going to need to eat.
Yeah, I guess for me the future is just a future where everyone's included. And I often hear, I go to sort of future think tanks and, the future of agriculture and the future of this and that, and I often don't hear, our voices in that future or how that future is going to look for our communities, our country, our plants, all these, and our cultural and intellectual property, all of these things that, we can't do that, create that future, as we've said a few times, on our own. Being the majority and already sort of being behind in, not having access to our land and ownership of our land for so long, and all these other things that kind of disenfranchise. A future in which not just we sort of, because of nice benevolence have a place, but we actually have unreal value in what that future might look like, because our ways of being on this country are tried and tested. They work. We're an ancient culture, but we have a lot to give to the future as well, and working sustainably and with reciprocity, with benefit sharing, relationally, the skills for the future, let alone our wealth of specific knowledges about our countries as well. A future for everyone. And we didn't even really talk too much even about food security, which is another big thing for our communities. 1 in 5 Aboriginal families go without food every week. So what does that look like, food security for us into the future as well? And so, my dream future is our people back on our, growing our foods on our country, land back, and bringing that benefit back into our communities, and having our knowledges continue to our young ones as well. We're forever people, since forever and for forever as well.
Thank you. I feel like that's such a comprehensive vision. And it brings me to that future vision of, that inclusivity and that good future that we all want to dream up, and that each of you on this panel are creating in this space. So I wanted to bring that back by just asking Dom and then everyone else, how can people support your work?
Yeah, I think generally just keep it in your space. It's so easy as a non-Indigenous person to not have to think about this stuff unless you come to sort of specific talks like this. But keep presence that thought, centre these thoughts, all these good thoughts that have come. Keep that going. And I've just soft launched, but soon to launch a online course, officially launch an online course. It's called Growing on Country, and it's written for non-Indigenous people, who want to be better allies and, empower yourselves to kind of think through, best practice, protocols, respectful ways of being, and your own agency and power. A lot of times people go, oh, well, I'm not the Prime Minister, so what can I do? But we can all do something even in our backyards. And I mean, I'm a pretty grassroots person, and I love thinking about what we can even do in our, 40 square metre blocks or whatever, because there's always things to do. That's Growing on Country, and Madonna's so gratefully been a part of that as well. You can look online and look at Yuruwan as well, yuruwan.org.au. So that's it. Just keep going. Keep the yarn going. Keep the thought going.
What was the question again?
Moving
it's
forward.
That time of night.
Moving forward, going away from tonight, I want to know, how can people stay connected and continue to support your work?
I encourage everybody to do some Google searches. We're so lucky that we have so much available now. I had to go to encyclopedias which had to be updated every 2 years. Do Google search. Find out, where does lemon-scented myrtle come from? Where does desert quandong grow? And become familiar about where these plants, where these fruits that we're starting to use, where they come from. Province them, get to know whose country it comes from, get to know if they have language associated to it. It will expand your experience, so that when you partake of those foods and you eat them, then you're eating them in the knowledge of which country, which dirt, which area has contributed to its flavours. It's a much richer experience as an Australian, and it's a very connecting piece as Australians. It roots you back into our country and back into the story of our country, and it will make us a part of each other that I don't think any reconciliation has done to date. So we are looking at an industry that's going to make us Australians in a way it never has before. And with respects to BBIC that I sit on, we've been working on for over 3 years a traceability app. Do you think we have not been able to... I say this with reservations because I personally hate asking the government for any money, which is why I support Indigenous enterprises, because then you don't need to ask, you just pay for it. And so having to argue the value of something that is Indigenous-led and Indigenous-owned why I need to do that is beyond me. But we've worked on and started the beta stage of it. Eventually it will go out to all Indigenous native foods. It will be Indigenous-led, it will be Indigenous-owned, and then it will go out to everybody else and work together to make it accessible and visible as to what in fact we've got out there. And it means that it'll enable anyone as a buyer to discern, is this from an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander community, and is it backed by science? Because one of the things about Kakadu plum, the reason why a lot of people don't understand it has the highest value of vitamin C is because of where it's grown, because of the land management practices that they have done there for tens of generations and more. It has created such a healthy system. They manage the country so that all of their fruiting trees don't die from intense wildfires. The tree develops immunity. It translates that immunity to that piece of fruit as vitamin C, which is the only way you're going to get that, and they use that to reduce arthritis and all other ailments. And that's the reason why we're getting to be able to look at, and the researchers are saying, if you grew that plant anywhere else in Australia, it might not have the same percentage of vitamin C. So I just encourage everyone, learn about where it's coming from. Let it be part of your connection to country.
How beautiful. Auntie Terry, how can people stay engaged and continue to support your work after tonight?
Thank you. What a lovely way to finish. We love people to come and spend some time with us. So on just about everything, we'll end it off with come and spend some time with us. We're up on the Sunshine Coast, Kabi country, and so, that's not always possible for everybody in our busy lives, but we're very open to that. The place you'll visit is the Forever Fruits and Flowers Orchard. We'll have you visit there, or maybe our cafe where we're supercharging the paddock to plate experience for everybody. But we also have an online marketplace. It's just, you can all go on it now actually, take out your phones, www.d-time, like Dreamtime, .com.au, and we're growing our marketplace on there all the time. But we've got salt and pepper infused with native, we call it new seasonings from an ancient land. We've got an online coffee subscription. It's a proprietary blend that belongs to Deadly Espresso, which is our first social enterprise that we started back in 2016. So you can subscribe to that. You can buy one in a year, or you can subscribe for those big coffee heads. You can subscribe to it, it can be delivered monthly to you. We're working on, with the Gallaroo value-adding products, we're working on a really lovely food booster. It's going to be the 7 commercial crops that we have on Gallaroo are going to be dehydrated and made into a beautiful heart blend that we're going to promote through naturopaths and mostly through naturopaths, that we're going to promote each individual hero ingredient, but coming together as a heart blend in this big love space that we've created. And that's going to be available online very shortly, as soon as our solar gets put in and our shed that's falling down the floor gets replaced. And it'll take you to a donation page as well, because we received DGR status in 2014. So come end of financial year, you can make a lovely end of financial year deductible gift recipient donation. And it'll support all of those things that we're doing and all the young people for that future world that we see, and our community.
While we're at it, mydillybag.com.au. You'll find us all online for all your bush tucker needs. Now, what I think is what I do at My Dilly Bag and within Cubby Cubby Country is to create a platform for First Nations entrepreneurs, because we just happen to be entrepreneurs that happen to be Aboriginal, yeah? So the point is that we have a Gather, GATHAA, market, First Nations market, happens every month. 600 people turned up yesterday. And when you come to our markets, you're able to engage with those First Nations businesses, but also participate in a lot of cultural awareness and practices. So there's weaving, there's emu feather strings, there's a whole range of different things. One of the uncle does, T-shirts and printing and artefacts making. So that's a really good way for you to keep...
Robbie just announced he's doing fire too.
Oh, and Robbie's doing fire, yes. So he's always online doing fire. So, so engaging with us. And, if you're not on the sunny coast but you're at the scenic rim or somewhere like that, get out there and just connect with Aboriginal people, really, and get yourself educated, as my mother always said, about the culture, about the people, and get involved. And learn from us, because we do want to share. And for me, it's mentoring and mentee. So we all learn from each other. So, I talk with a lot of people, whether they're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, and I always learn something that I can take back and implement in my shop, whether it's business to talk about my staff, or whether it's a development of a new product. There's always something there that we're going to do that mentor-mentee stuff, yeah? So, mydillybag.com.au.
Thank you so much to every single one of you, matriarchs in your own way in this space. What an honour. Thank you so much for letting me MC this conversation. Thank you all for coming. One more big round of applause, please, for these incredible women.